You are now watching Zach Lesage, the best place to learn about competitive Pokemon TCG. Let's get it! What's going on YouTube? Welcome back to the channel, Zach Lesage here. Today we're going to be going over the top 10 best decks in our Fusion Strike metagame. The metagame's had a lot of changes this week, and there's a few decks that are entering into the top 10 for the first time in a minute. So be excited about all of that. Maybe the thumbnail gave it away, maybe it didn't. That being said, all the decks are going to be in the pinned comment below, along with reference videos for most of those decks. So you want to know a little bit more about the deck or watch some gameplay, be sure to check out those links. That being said, there's a lot to cover, so let's jump into our number 10 spot. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Let's get it. Starting off at our number 10 spot, we have Rapid Strike INTELEON VMAX. So this is one of the new decks that we got from Fusion Strike, and it's a really good deck for a lot of good reasons. So INTELEON VMAX is a Rapid Strike Pokemon, so that means it could use Rapid Strike Energy. Its attack costs water colorless, which Rapid Strike Energy does meet the requirements, and then you do 70 damage, and if you lift your energy, which you can lift this Rapid Strike Energy back, you do 140. Now, this means that you'll have 0 energies on your INTELEON VMAX, which means if your opponent does not knock you out, you can play Cheryl and heal all of that damage off. I've added Big Charms, and a lot of other players have been adding Big Charms into their list in order to make sure that your opponent is not knocking out your active INTELEON VMAX. You can search out that Rapid Strike Energy, or a lot of Rapid Strike cards in fact, with Octillery's Rapid Strike Search, and of course you have a Drizzile INTELEON line that allows you to do extra damage counters to your opponents, search things out, etc. Overall, this deck is tanky. It's been doing very well in the metagame. The only issue is if you run against a deck that can easily OHKO you, or hit those numbers such as Gengar VMAX, Single Strike URSHIFU VMAX, even Mew VMAX with those power tablets can hit you. That's why INTELEON VMAX is a little bit lower. On top of that, JOLTEON VMAX has seen an incredible rise in play. INTELEON VMAX is a really good deck. I think it's one of those sleeper decks that could definitely win a major event, so keep that in mind. I do consider this a lower deck, and it could even jump out of the top 10. That's how low it is on here. So very close between those like 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 spots. Just to put it in perspective, there was Victini at number 11. So those decks are constantly battling back and forth, but overall, a great deck overall. Overall. Hopping into our number 9 spot, we have an old favorite, ETERNATUS VMAX. Now, ETERNATUS VMAX took a bit of a backseat in our last format, and that's because Rapid Strike URSHIFU and Single Strike were everywhere. With Rapid Strike taking a little bit of a backseat this format, and ETERNATUS VMAX being good against top decks in the format, such as Mew VMAX, Dark-type Pokemon beat Psychic-type Pokemon for the most part, Etern has a chance to kind of thrive again. This is really like one of those like weird mixtures of players either playing the Umbreon VMAX version or the Galarian Weezing version. I personally like the ability of Dark Signal. I think that sounds pretty cool. The goal of this deck is to really build up a bench. You get to increase your bench size with Eternal Zone, and then you can hit for 270 with Dread End. That's good enough to knock out a lot of Pokemon such as SUICUNE V, even with a Cape of Toughness, or Zacian V. Etern has some cool things going on about it, and of course Umbreon VMAX has seen success in both Gengar VMAX decks and in Single Strike URSHIFU VMAX decks. This deck seems to work as just like a big dark deck, and that's really where it's at. It is entering into our top 10 for the first time in a minute. If anything, I think this deck can grow in the eventual metagame once we get Ultra Ball. This is the type of deck that you probably want to have Ultra Ball for. Otherwise, I think that ETERN VMAX is probably going to be between lower top 10 to the 11 to 15 range in the metagame. So it might have just been a few wins that caused a chain reaction, because ETERN can win a small event. Someone's like, yo, ETERN sounds cool, wins a slightly larger event. Other people see that it's seeing success, and then it kind of, that's how decks grow really quickly at the bottom. So I'd say ETERNATUS VMAX, if anything, could fall out of the top 10, but it's a solid choice if you're looking for a good deck. Other considerations for this deck would be Adventurer's Discovery, so keep that in mind as you experiment with these decks. ETERN's still a deck that can grow from Fusion Strike. Hopping in at number 8, we have Ice Rider CALYREX VMAX with SUICUNE V. This kind of hybrid Melanie-based deck allowing you to attack with SUICUNE V or Ice Rider CALYREX VMAX. It takes a little bit of the SUICUNE LUDICOLO deck or SUICUNE INTELEON deck and the Ice Rider INTELEON deck, and kind of slams them together. You got Path to the Peaks from the traditional Ice Rider CALYREX VMAX deck. You have Cape of Toughness from the traditional SUICUNE V deck, and you're really just choosing which attacker is better for the right situation. So going a 3 prize card attack with Ice Rider CALYREX VMAX, 2 prize card Pokemon with SUICUNE V, and then maybe forcing your opponent to draw another 3 prize cards or 2 prize cards. Eventually, you want to force your opponent to draw more than 6 prize cards with this deck while keeping up to the tempo or pace that your opponent is throwing at you. So maybe you don't have time to evolve an Ice Rider CALYREX V into a VMAX. This deck has the flexibility to send out SUICUNE V and attack and not have to evolve or anything else like that. Overall, these styles of decks have been successful in the past. I do think the new version of Ice Rider is better, the one with hammers, and I do think SUICUNE LUDICOLO is better. There's nothing wrong with this deck by any means. I just think it takes 2 decks and tries to sandwich them together where you have 2 more successful decks, and we'll see a little bit later on the list. I don't like to give surprises, but I think SUICUNE LUDICOLO and Ice Rider have both been seeing a lot of success lately, so no surprise for me. If it's a surprise for you, this video is going to be great for you. That being said, this deck still has a spot in the metagame. I just think that it's better to do decks that are doing better things in general. So this deck to me seems like it might just eventually get absorbed by SUICUNE LUDICOLO, or it might just get consumed by Ice Rider, or this might just be the de facto Ice Rider list if people stop playing the new version of just solo Ice Rider. Those are all things where I think this deck is either going to go down or Ice Rider is just going to turn right back into this deck. I do want to let everyone know, if you are looking to pick up any of these cards online, you could go to PTCGO plug in code Lesage5. That discount code's in the description as well, and that also helps support me as a content creator and gives you a bit of a discount on your next order of codes. Sliding into our number 7 spot, we have LEAFEON VMAX. Now, LEAFEON VMAX is it's not blind to the top of the metagame, and I think sneaking in here number 7, it seems appropriately placed. LEAFEON VMAX seems to do well against most of the decks in the format that are not Mew VMAX, or decks that just have 0 retreat cost. So with Jolteon and Mew kind of riding the top of the metagame, those are going to be difficult and kind of sore spots for the LEAFEON VMAX. But if you're able to use Grass Knot on Pokemon that have more retreat cost than those, or just pretty much anything else in general, LEAFEON VMAX has been doing great recently. The goal of this deck is to use Grass Knot with Galar Mine, and you can also use Tool Jammer to shut off your opponent's Air Balloon, so you can hit for a decent bit of damage, clear up that damage with Quick Shooting. Now, in our formats, LEAFEON's been doing pretty well against a lot of the top decks. SUICUNE LUDICOLO, you can get past their Cape of Toughness with Tool Jammer. You can go ahead and knock out a single strike URSHIFU VMAX and stuff like that. Like, LEAFEON VMAX has some very good matchups in the metagame. It seems like this deck has got some worse matchups as Jolteon and Mew are performing better, which is the reason why this deck is in the lower half of the top 10. Now, it was number 7 last week, so it didn't necessarily drop, but as the metagame continuously shapes around Mew and Jolteon, again, no, I don't want to like give any spoilers or anything when it comes to the things, but we'll see how the list turns out. I think right now LEAFEON VMAX, if anything, could go down a little bit based off my experience with the metagame. However, 7 seems like an appropriate spot where it could just fall into. I've seen a lot of players playing LEAFEON VMAX with either the Beedrill kind of engine, or playing something with Galarian Moltres. They're looking for ways to knock out Mew VMAX. A lot of these times, you might just want to take the loss, or just play a different deck that might be able to beat those decks. Not every single deck is going to be good forever, and I think LEAFEON VMAX is appropriately positioned in the metagame. It can't just be one of the top decks at this current point, because the other top decks are gatekeeping this deck out. So again, I think it's probably going to be similarly positioned, if not relatively around where it's already positioned. Hopping into number 6 at a surprising turn is Galarian Obstagoon. Now, this is a deck that I covered relatively early in the Fusion Strike metagame, ever since I saw Jake Gearhart really take a tournament and do really well at it. That being said, Jake Gearhart most recently was able to crush down one of my late night events, smaller middle of the week or end of the week events that I just kind of sporadically post up there. Very competitive events, and kind of taking it down with Obstagoon. Also this past week, we saw Daichi Shimeda be able to play Galarian Obstagoon to a few top finishes, and a few other players have taken notice. That's why this deck has been able to get some of these strong finishes overall. The goal of this deck is to place damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon with either Headbutt Tantrum on Galarian Zigzagoon or Quick Shooting on Inteleon, and then hit with Merciless Strike to do 60 plus 90. You could always get your energies back with Raihan, search for rare candies. This deck is just a very good single prize card attacking deck deck that is quite good against the format because Mew VMAX is weak to dark, and I mean, it's a single prize card deck, and I mean, Obstagoon is just generally pretty powerful as well, so usually there is a single prize card deck within the top 10. I'm happy to have something like this, a stage 2 Pokemon. Obstagoon's a cool Pokemon, lots of cool things going on here. Like I said, I did cover this deck, and I've also covered some gameplay with this deck as well, tabletop-wise, so by all means, be sure to check that out, learn a little bit more about it. I think that this deck, if anything, is probably going to go down a little bit. Most stage 2 decks have some inconsistency issues, which cause players to play them a little bit less. This is my personal list. I think that this list is very good, so I recommend giving it a try for yourself, but if anything, I think it might fall down a little bit just because of the unpopularity of single prize card decks overall. Here we are, number 5, at the middle of the list, Ice Rider CALYREX VMAX. Also previously at number 5, so pretty bang on. I think that this deck's quite good in the metagame because it can hold its own against most top decks in the format. We can thank that due to the consistency of Ride of the High King and large bench sizes, on top of max lance and quick shooting, dealing enough damage to just really stay relevant when it comes to this deck. Crushing Hammer and Fan of Waves are both very into the meta right now. You plays lots of special energies and a limited amount of energies. Decks like Jolteon play a limited amount of energies. Like, the list goes on and on and on. If you hit a few Crushing Hammerheads, you could do pretty good against most decks. We saw Azul take this deck to a top 4 finish at my late night series event on Monday with over 270 players. So it's one of those things where this deck kind of kicked off that success with a pro player seeing success with that deck. Overall, I really like Ice Rider CALYREX VMAX. I've said it many times before. I've played this deck to the Players Cup Invitational, one of my favorite decks from the last format, one of my current favorite decks this format. It seems quite neutral against the metagame, and it can hold its own against a lot of decks. Still very consistent, so you're not necessarily going to fold to just like, I poorly drew or anything else like that. So I recommend giving this deck a try if you're kind of sick and tired of the Fusion Strike metagame, or you're not necessarily getting the draws that you want, etc., etc. This deck has really just been seeing a lot of success. Why not give it a try? If anything, I think that this deck's probably appropriately placed. It's not the best deck in format by any means. It doesn't lose to a lot of stuff, but it also doesn't necessarily easily win against a lot of stuff. And as much as it might be like, okay, Zach, as long as you're not like losing, you're still kind of winning, right? The answer is no. I'd rather be playing Mew VMAX against a Rapid Strike URSHIFU deck pretty much any day than be playing an Ice Rider CALYREX VMAX deck against a Mew deck. While I am able to win and I am able to outwit a lot of my opponents, I do have to fight a little bit harder for my wins, and that doesn't necessarily mean they're within my grasp all the time. A lot of it's just like something happens in the game or my opponent makes a mistake, or Ice Rider CALYREX VMAX does not have that secured win percentage as much. So it's a little bit more of a high risk deck if you're looking at it, while staying relatively neutral, if that makes sense. So being neutral doesn't necessarily mean that you're always neutral. There is some risk involved to being in the middle. But overall, great deck, one of my favorites, and I do plan on covering this on the channel relatively soon, so stay tuned for a video on that. Here we are at number 4, and falling 2 spots previously from number 2 is Single Strike URSHIFU VMAX. So I'll be the first to admit, falling down a couple spots, going from 2 to 4, really ain't that bad. You're still within the top 4 decks in the format, right? And I mean, Single Strike URSHIFU VMAX is no stranger to the top decks. Sometimes the deck gets a little bit inconsistent, but I've done some things to change it up a little bit here. I've added in Zinnia's Resolve because bench sizes are pretty big right now, and Bruno as well. Bruno is kind of like a Marnie, a lot in this deck, but you have access to it being single strike, which means you can pitch it away with Tower of Darkness. It might sound like a little bit of a... It's one of those things where I'm being a little fancy with the deck list. I hope some of y'all appreciate it. If y'all don't, no worries. By all means, feel free to cut the Zinnias and the Brunos for Marnies if that's what you're feeling. I just don't think you necessarily need to be playing too many Marnies when it comes to this deck, and drawing cards, or maybe even getting the chance to shuffle draw 7, or discard it off Tower of Darkness, sounds pretty cool to me. The goal of this deck is to use G-Max 1 Blow against Pokemon that you could use G-Max 1 Blow against. Maybe you don't want to be using that. Maybe you want to be using Single Strike URSHIFU V against things like Jolteon VMAX and ETERNATUS VMAX because you're fighting type Pokemon. Or maybe, catch this, you might want to use Umbreon VMAX or Umbreon V against a Mew VMAX or a Dragapult VMAX or Shadow Rider CALYREX VMAX. There's ways to make that happen. You could accelerate those energies with Single Strike Roar, do more damage with your Single Strike energies, and that's really how the Single Strike engine works overall. I think this list has been working pretty good. I was able to make top 8 at a tournament with it, doing pretty well in Swiss, losing ultimately to, I think it was an ETERNATUS deck or something. I just drew poorly. It happens when it comes to this deck. I'm actually surprised that this deck is going down a little bit, but not too surprised, because a lot of SUICUNE and Ice Rider decks have been popping up lately. So that's probably why this deck's taking a little bit of a dive, and still a lot of players are playing LEAFEON and Obstagoon coming out as a single prize card attacking deck. Mew doesn't always fold to this deck. As much as you're like, yo, I'm Dark type, well, if you just go Umbreon pass, Mew's already doing the knocking on your Umbreon, and it doesn't matter what type you are if you are knocked out. Overall, I think Single Strike URSHIFU VMAX is a great deck. I plan on covering this on the Shuffle Squad. I do want to let everyone know that I create content for the Shuffle Squad every single Thursday and Friday regularly, so I am doing a special deck profile on Single Strike URSHIFU VMAX, this list, so by all means, check it out on Wednesday at the Shuffle Squad. Subscribe there if you haven't already. Lots of great content for myself and some other top-notch content creators. I think this deck is absolutely awesome, and it's one of those things where it's probably going to stay within the top 5. If not, it could always go up a little bit more. Sliding into number 3, and from number 3 last week as well, we got SUICUNE v LUDICOLO with INTELEON. So the goal of this deck is to really get a Blizzard Rondo with SUICUNE V set up very quickly with Melanie to accelerate your energies. And depending on how much damage you need to do, you could either use Quick Shooting INTELEON and or Ludicolo's Enthusiastic Dance. Ludicolo's Enthusiastic Dance raises your damage done by your basic Pokemon by 100 damage the turn that you evolve. So you got a couple of rare candies. I like playing a Lombre. You could go ahead and cut a Lombre for a Lotad, maybe even increase a rare candy in the deck. With there not being too much spread in this deck, in this format, I should say, with Dragapult VMAX taking a little bit of a backseat in our Fusion Strike metagame, I think that you can go the Lombre route, and it's a little bit more efficient and effective when it comes to this deck. Overall, I think that SUICUNE v Ludicolo is probably, again, one of these neutral decks when it's very similar to Ice Rider. You're not necessarily going to be winning every single game that you be playing, and decks like Mew can definitely tech around things like by playing Oricorio in their deck, and Jolteon is Lightning type and you're a SUICUNE V deck. These are things that might be gatekeeping it a little bit out from being number 1 or number 2, but I do think this is currently a top 5 deck, and number 3 is very fitting of this deck. So if you're looking to continuously do well or just have a good time playing Pokemon, I think SUICUNE v Ludicolo is relatively powerful, and it's always going to do relatively well. It's like the upper echelon of the neutral decks. Either this or Ice Rider, CALYREX with hammers are both very neutral and very good for this particular metagame. Here we are at our runner-up spot, Jolteon VMAX at number 2, jumping all the way from number 9, so this one kind of leaped the most. I mean, we had Obstagoon and Ice Rider, CALYREX, SUICUNE, and Etern all enter into the metagame, or all enter within the top 10. Jolteon VMAX shot up like 7 spots. It went from number 9, a bottom performing deck, to number 2. I think it's just like figuring out the correct list, dropping the Dust Noir, and a lot of top tournament placements, specifically by Cal Connor, one of a great player coming back from 2013 to 2016 era, coming back during the COVID era or online era of Pokemon, and just crushing it again, telling a lot of players, and myself included, that the greatness that you achieve in Pokemon doesn't necessarily leave you, even if you take a break. So my list is heavily based off Cal's list. Shout out to Cal. Max Thunder Rumble is all about adding a damage counter to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon, so you can hit 100 and 100 damage to that bench Pokemon with the damage counter. You can get that bench damage counter with Zigzagoon or with Quick Shooting, making this deck relatively effective. You also have Cheryl to heal things off. The cool thing about this deck is you could put an Elemental Badge on a Jolteon VMAX, then attach an energy. Even if you Cheryl that off, you could still just attach an energy. It doesn't rip off the Elemental Badge when you heal. This deck has like a mixed matchup against Mew. Some players think that it's bad. Those might be players that are not playing Crystal Cave. Some players think that it's favorable. I go back and forth on it. I think that it can handle its own against Mew. It's obviously a good deck. It does very well against SUICUNE Ludicolo, and it can even do well against other random decks on this list like LEAFEON and even Obstagoon and stuff like that. So overall, I think Jolteon VMAX well positioned in this format. Been crushing events lately. If anything, it's like almost a guaranteed placement, and with Single Strike URSHIFU taking a little bit of a step down, I think Jolteon VMAX currently is a top 5 deck, and it's here to stay. You made it! Here we are at number 1, and previously at number 1 as well, we got Mew VMAX. Now, Mew VMAX has been tearing up events ever since it was released, and I think it's just because it's such an aggressive deck. A lot of peeps might get a little bit intimidated by the ability to copy any of the Fusion Strike Pokemon that you have in play. Mainly, you're going to be copying Technoblast, so this just seems like it's more of an aggressive version than Turbo Zacian. I think a lot of Turbo Zacian players, and a lot of players in general, have been able to pick up their Mew VMAX cards. If you haven't, I know it's expensive. I recommend playing in event tournament tickets. You can go to PTCGO use code ZLesage5, maybe talk to your local stores about some codes, you know, like play the ladder. There's ways to acquire codes for free. I can't necessarily justify the price of Mew VMAX for everyone. I'm sorry that an expensive deck is performing well. I do gotta cover everything though, so I just want to let everyone know that. So Mew VMAX is great, versatile, it could copy a lot of different attacks, mainly copying Technoblast. Genesect V itself is probably one of the strongest, if not craziest draw engines that we've seen in the entirety of the game, allowing you to draw as many cards as you have in play until you have as many cards that you have in play as Fusion Strike Pokemon in play in your hands. I'm probably butchering how that sounds, but for all the Pokemon that you have in play, you draw a card until you have that many cards in your hand. Think of that as how you wish. Read the card if it doesn't necessarily make sense. I do also have a reference video in the comments below. I don't know, sometimes I just don't make sense when I speak, but it's all good. Genesect V, very good at drawing cards. And of course, there's a lot of different techs that this deck plays, and it plays arguably one of the weirdest supporter engines because Genesect V is so good at drawing cards. Lots of cool ways to increase your damage with Power Tablet, bringing up your opponent's Pokemon with Boss or Cross Switcher, and a diversified supporter or stadium count to really get around Path to the Peak and get rid of stadiums in your hand so you could draw more cards with Fusion Strike system. I think Mew VMAX is the real deal and it's probably going to stay at the number 1 spot just because of its raw power. It's very aggressive and can steal games the same way that Turbo Zacian does, but then has a versatile game plan and better draw. So if you're looking for a budget way to play this deck, Turbo Zacian is where it's at. I think that deck seemingly is very similar to Mew VMAX. If you're looking for a way to counter Mew VMAX, you're definitely going to want to pull out the dark type decks. I think that either playing Gengar VMAX, ETERN VMAX, even Obstagoon, those are all great choices. Single strikes up there. I also think that Ice Rider CALYREX VMAX has a decent matchup against Mew VMAX, and that's something that I plan on covering this week again. I will likely do an updated Mew VMAX deck in the future, so stay tuned for that. But right now, it's going to be riding at number 1, and this list is very good if you haven't tried the deck out yet. I hope that everyone enjoyed watching this video and learned a little bit more about the top 10 decks in our current format. I cover these decks every single Monday, changing depending on what the metagame is, and on Fridays I cover it on the Shuffle Squad's channel, so by all means check out the Shuffle Squad as well. But you're already here, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I really appreciate everyone just kind of vibing out and learning more about these decks and all the support lately on the channel. We just passed 7,000 subs not that long ago. We're so close to 7,500 subs, and the growth has been absolutely astounding. I'm just super happy and feeling good as a content creator, you know what I'm saying? If you have any questions about these decks, feel free to let me know in the comments below. I do get back to things pretty much within 24 hours. There's a lot more comments lately. That being said, please, more comments in general. Let me know exactly what's going on comment-wise. Let me know what's going on in your day. Be like, do I like these videos? Is there any suggestions that you have? Anything else like that? I'd totally love to hear from you. That being said, I got a lot of editing to do when it comes to this video, so I will catch up with all y'all later. Peace out, and have a great day. I truly appreciate you taking the time out of your day to watch this video. It means the world to me. And my goal with this channel is to spread my love of the game and knowledge with our entire Pokemon TCG community. If you haven't already, help signal boost this video to other Pokemon TCG fans by liking it, sharing it with your friends, and subscribing to the channel. Hopefully we reach our goals really soon. Check out this recommended video, and have yourself a great day. Thanks.